Hello everyone. So my name is Ray Budavari. I'm a senior staff technical product manager and platform architect in our networking and security business unit at VMware. So today I'll be covering NSX Intelligence at Security Field Day. Actually at VMworld last year, NSX Intelligence won a Best of Show award for disruptive technology. So I'm kind of looking forward to showing everyone how we're innovating by applying analytics to the security domain. All right, so I'm definitely going to spend most of my time on the demonstration, letting the product do most of the talking. And I really want to encourage all this great Q&A that we've been having as well. So I'm just going to use a few slides for a bit of context on NSX Intelligence, and help explain why we believe we're really doing something unique and differentiated in this area. And that's really because at VMware, we strongly believe that security analytics and the use of data science techniques like artificial intelligence and machine learning are a great fit with NSX, right? It builds upon the things that we already do well, that you already know about NSX. The fact that we, with NSX, we support multiple platforms, right? Multiple hypervisors, cloud native workloads, bare metal, public cloud, right? With our distributed data plane, we have unique context about workloads, right? We're inline for every single flow across the network, have deep packet inspection. We can go into the workload using our guest introspection channel to get, user, process, and application level visibility, as you've already seen, right? We know the platform, this model of distribution scales, right? We have customers using NSX to protect, 50,000 plus workloads in their environments. So that gives us, a scalable platform upon which to build these analytics capabilities. Obviously, at VMware, we partner with everyone that matters in the security industry. And we also have other solutions at VMware like vRealize Network Insight and Carbon Black that can give us even more context. So what we're doing with NSX Intelligence is really leveraging analytics to build more value on top of the NSX platform to provide end-to-end visibility and automation and lifecycle management of your NSX security policy, which is exactly what we'll see in the demonstration. I do want to explain, though, that, while we're investing in analytics, we see it building on our strengths in NSX. We also saw a lot of drawbacks with the traditional approaches to analytics, which relied on, a centralized architecture for collection, and also agents or might have been tied to specific network devices, right? Those approaches had obviously a very large footprint and size, right? You needed potentially racks of servers and storage to be able to collect all of this information to apply analytics, or you needed to manage endpoints across, agents across thousands of different endpoints. They could create additional overhead on the network, duplicating traffic, or they had the trade-off of limited context because they had to sample data. They could only get limited, flow information with low fidelity. Right? In contrast, by contrast with NSX Intelligence, right, what we've done is delivered a native distributed analytics engine, right? We've already proven with NSX that we can apply services like routing and stateful firewalling, it's using a distributed model. So, it's a natural fit for us to build analytics using a similar distributed model, right? And this allows us to build, in contrast, a very lightweight approach where we've optimized and applied processing at the source and minimize the amount of data that we need to send to an appliance so we can deliver NSX Intelligence as an extension to the platform in a virtual appliance form factor. Right, and this is possible because of that NSX architecture, right? It allows us to do, inline processing for multiple features, whether it's firewalling, traffic redirection or copying, IDS like Stein showed, or analytics, right? We can do this directly at the virtual interface in kernel space at very low overhead. And obviously it scales with the compute and the resources in your infrastructure, and we only need to apply this processing, to the workloads running on a given host. So we think this, fundamentally better model of distribution can also apply to the realm of analytics. Other benefits that we have is that we've built NSX Intelligence, directly on top of the proven NSX platform. So it's a very short path, as you'll see in the demonstration, for us to go from an analytics, an AI-driven recommendation into effective policy, right? We're leveraging a number of patented AI and ML algorithms that build upon VMware's awareness and knowledge of what an east-west or a microsegmentation and zero trust security policy should look like. And because of the NSX architecture, right, we don't have that trade-off of sampling or being too far away from the workload to get context, right? We see everything and don't have any trade-offs in our analysis. So the last thing I wanted to mention is a little bit of the solution overview before we jump into the demonstration, just to explain what we've built with NSX Intelligence. So I mentioned it's an additional appliance that you deploy and lifecycle manage. It's lifecycle managed by NSX. But basically what this does is it gives us a data platform to build up a historical data repository of all of that context, the flow and guest information in your environment. And it allows us to store up to 30 days of data upon which we can run our analytics. So what we do is we stream, or this is built on a streaming architecture where every hypervisor or transport node streams information to the NSX Intelligence data platform. Because it's distributed, we only stream and only send unique flows. We apply optimizations like deduplication, compression, caching, right? We really minimize the amount of data we need to send to the appliance. We also send data from the manager to correlate, for example, things like security groups, group membership, statistics, and we store all of this in our data platform. And then on top of this, we have our NSX Intelligence Analytics Engine, right? And this allows us to implement the functionality that you'll see in the demonstration, right? Which is visualization or visibility of your security posture across the entire environment. What's your effective security state, and when there are any deviations from what should be the normal secure state. Planning, which goes back to that excellent leading question we had before, which is, it's very powerful to have a firewall at the virtual interface of every workload, but unless you have a very deep understanding of what your applications and workloads are and what the security policy should look like, right, that also leads to the potential for complexity, or it's difficult to leverage that. With NSX Intelligence, you could think of it as the easy button for automating and learning what that policy should look like, and then generating recommended rules, groups, and services for your firewall policy. And then
Sorry to interrupt, just a question on that. Hopefully you do go into it. So one of the challenges with these kind of machine learning things is they can be quite opaque. And while it's certainly easy to have essentially computerized minions go out and figure this out for me, does it then explain how it came to the conclusion of what it's recommending? Because if I have a human who says, I recommend you make the following changes, I can ask them questions about why they think that's a good idea. Am I able to do that with the NSX Intelligence Engine?
Yeah, there are, there's a good question. So you'll see in the demonstration what we'll do, and a couple of the capabilities that we're working on are the ability to, so firstly, you can review any of these recommendations and fine tune them before you publish them. So we'll give you visibility of how we came to that particular recommendation, and you can adapt it for your environment. And then two other capabilities that I think are important are the ability to monitor, continuously refine it, so we can update it based on what's happening in your environment and tell you, when things may have changed. And the last one is to simulate or dry run. So basically test that change before you apply it in your environment. So, we can tell you what the impact of that policy will be, both on that particular application or workload, but even anything else within the data center that may be communicating with it. So that, to your point, you do get visibility of, the recommendation before it gets pushed. And then you can also see what the impact is. And so what we have is some customers like to, for example, include this in their deployment workflows, using CI/CD tooling. So they may use a query by the API, look at those changes, and compare them against their applications. So yeah, we do try to provide full visibility of, how we came to those recommendations, and give you the chance to test them before they get applied.
Sure. Okay. I'm keen to see that explainability part of things, particularly on. I'm thinking partly around the audit reasons for the reason people don't turn on IDS, for example, is they're afraid that the false positives will break something. I would prefer that to get to the point where I'm running a network that if something does break, I can explain what happened rather than, man, the computer went mad. What are we going to do?
Actually, that does also touch on, one of the enhancements we're working on for NSX Intelligence, which is real-time auditing and compliance. And so that, that could be auditing or compliance around different, standards that you need to meet, like PCI, HIPAA, etc. But it could also be general reporting of your environment. So, based on, the threats that you may be blocking or policy changes, what's the impact of that policy too? So that's another area we're working on, which is a reporting and auditing based on analytics.
Okay.
Will the NSX Intelligence Engine be able to do policy enforcement from a compliance standpoint, or is that available today, or is that something that we can look for in the future?
Just to be clear, it's the NSX Intelligence Engine that drives the NSX platform to do policy enforcement. So we will program, distributed firewalling and those other native features to do policy enforcement. And then, another thing that I should mention is that we'll have intelligence feeds from products like vRealize Network Insight and Carbon Black for additional context as well. But the enforcement, the stateful policy enforcement is always done through the NSX platform.
Hey, Ray, let's try. I like it that you don't call it machine learning. So a lot of analytics, but not the ML buzzword.
Right. Yeah, to be clear, we do use machine learning, right? We have the concept of supervised and unsupervised learning, and that depends on whether your data is classified or not. So for example, if you've done things like you've already defined your applications in your cloud management platform or your CMDB, right? We can apply learning based on that. If you haven't done that, we can even use that to discover groups. So that is part of what we leverage in our analytics. But yeah, we've tried not to just jump on those buzzwords. So yeah, that's I think a good point too. That while we leverage those technologies, those are not something that the user has to manage or worry about. part of the capabilities that we've built internal to the product.
Question from my side. NSX Intelligence can also leverage APIs to extract visualization data and the analytics component to create an end-to-end environment visualization?
Yeah, so you will see the native visualization that we have, and this is an area we've invested very heavily in. How do we allow you to get visibility of all of the traffic and context in your environment? It's a hard problem to do at scale. But so those are native visualizations. Everything that we have in the platform, so the recommendations and the context, is available via APIs. And in fact, I also meant so that APIs are available for retrieving information. One other thing that I think is very powerful that we're looking at enabling, I mentioned this is built on a streaming platform. So we will also build extensibility using a pub sub or message bus to share analyzed information as well. So it depends on the type of data you're after. If it's after like a point in time visualization or a recommendation, you could query that via APIs. If you needed to receive larger quantities of data, we'll have a message bus integration available as well. So the streaming platform that we use will be extensible. The next thing I'll do here is go through a brief demonstration on NSX Intelligence and just highlight that end-to-end visibility across different workload types, the rich context we have in NSX and how we're surfacing it, and that automation of security policy leveraging analytics. So first thing I'll point out, this is the NSX system overview dashboard, right? It's the first screen you see when you log into NSX, and it allows me to highlight, in the bottom right, we have an NSX Intelligence node in this particular environment. So, we've seamlessly integrated NSX Intelligence into a single NSX UI, right? We're not providing a separate console and tool here. It's one place to manage all of your security policy. I think Stein's demos had a light theme, right? I want to show you in 2020, we also have a dark theme in our product too, which seems to be a requirement. So I'm showing you now the dark theme in NSX. But basically, from here in my environment, I'll navigate over to the security tab and the distributed firewall and show you a very rudimentary rule set here. You could almost think of it as the basic policy, which is I'm blocking a few insecure services or dropping them, but really everything else in this environment is hitting the default rule of any allow. So, you could think of this NSX now being, inspecting traffic, but not doing enforcement. It's really, like I said, we're inline, in a learning mode, building up that historical data, and visibility of what the traffic and the security baseline looks in your environment. Then I'll move over to plan and troubleshoot and actually, highlight the NSX Intelligence Visualization capabilities. All right, so this is where, we've built this, as I said, we've invested quite a lot in how we visualize your security posture, but basically it's a hierarchical user interface which starts at an environment level view. You can see all of the traffic flows and security posture across all the different components, workloads in your environment. So we've actually got, these are all of the different applications, right? We've also built this on top of a rich set of filtering capabilities. So next I'm going to actually filter based on an application. So if I apply, what we can do is very quickly drill from an environment view into just the groups that make up an application. And this, as I mentioned, could either be something that were pushed to us from another data source, or actually discovered by NSX Intelligence, right? And you can see in this particular application, I have a front end running in the public cloud. I also have a number of groups that are containers, so microservices. My persistent data is in databases running on virtual machines, and I'm also accessing some infrastructure services on bare metal. So it's a multi-platform application, and that's what the different icons mean. But the other thing is that it allows me to highlight is that we can see this security posture, right? There are majority of traffic flows in this environment are unprotected, and that means they're just hitting that default rule. I also have a number of alerts, right? And actually, because this is a distributed platform, if I hover over the alerts, I get kind of a summary view of the type of traffic that we've seen, and whether traffic is unprotected, blocked, or allowed, and if we're surfacing any anomalies, right? I'll go through this reasonably quickly, but I can do the same thing for cloud.
Can I ask a quick question? In the top right, it says last 24 hours. Is it possible to say, hey, I want to look at what this looks like yesterday from between 3 and 5 p.m. as an example?
Great question. I will actually show that a bit later in the demonstration. So this is where we have that historical data where we can go up. We can go from 1 hour, 12 hours, 24, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. So we can change the view. One thing we're working on is that idea of a slider where you can customize the view. So we don't have that in the product yet. We just have fixed time series. But that's a great question because it's something we're looking at, the ability to choose your own time window, but it's not there today. But I will show you that at the end of the demo. So this, I think, is highlighting the flow level visibility that we have. So you can see this across all of the different workload types. We also have at the group level, right, information. And in fact, it allows me to dive deeper in and show you a view. So this is showing that hierarchical nature of this UI, right? We can drop into the next level of detail in NSX Intelligence and now start to visualize all of the flows that are intra and intergroup. So VM to VM flows, VM to container, VM to bare metal can all be visualized here, right? If I click on a specific virtual machine now, I can actually look at all of the flows that are occurring in real time. And here you can start to see us surfacing even more of that context, right? So this is where we're surfacing the actual traffic flow, source and destination, which user and process initiated flows, what the service is based on the port and protocol. But AppID leverages that deep packet inspection that we have to tell you whether the actual traffic, the payload, matches the port and protocol. And on line 3, we're already flagging that actually, even though we expected Redis traffic, what we're seeing on the wire is SSH, right? VM information is leveraging that guest introspection channel to go into the workload and tell us things like operating system, type, distribution, IP addresses, user and process information. I'll skip the IDS information because Stein covered that. So in the interest of time, what I want to show you now is really that policy recommendation or formulation piece. So, you can see here, obviously, this application does not have an NSX, a microsegmentation policy in place yet. And it's why we're seeing all of these alerts, unprotected flows, right? So the other part here is if I click on this magic wand icon is I can start a recommendation on the scope of this application, right? It's automatically filtered to the workloads, the VMs, bare metal, and containers that comprise this application. We can choose a time range here going, from any of those time series that I mentioned, so all the way back to 30 days if we needed to account for short-lived flows or maybe cyclical processing. So we can choose the scope, the time range. because I don't have too long, I'm going to keep my demo short. And what I'll do is, just to keep things moving along, I'll start the discovery, right? And so this is now where our NSX Analytics Engine is running on all that historical data we've collected for these workloads. So we're running those patented algorithms to ultimately automate the security policy, right? So, you know, this will take a few seconds to run. Obviously, based on the number of workloads and how long back in time you go, will determine the length of time it takes to complete your recommendation. Okay, so now it's finished, and it's telling.
Quick question.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I was having to interrupt. This is lovely, but my biggest thing is a lot of times when I'm in an environment, I've got quite a bit of stuff integrated into a SIEM. Is there that capability here? Like, one thing that I get a lot of is I might have I might have things identified, pushed to the SIEM, and then the SIEM is the one that's making the decisions, and it might push it back. You can take this action, for example. Is that a capability, or is it in the IPS IDS that has to be done in your environment? It can't give actions back automated?
So yeah, that's where we go back to everything is available here through APIs and message bus as well. So we can export data to a SIEM, and then the SIEM can use APIs to generate a recommendation, and then NSX can apply the policy. So that integration is certainly available if you have additional sources of kind of intelligence about your security posture, or security in your environment.
Yeah, well, that was kind of an additional question I had, is like, because you said the signatures are all from you, which is through the Spider labs, I think is what you said. And if I wanted to integrate any further intelligence, I'd have to do that on the SIEM side and push it down, or would it be something I can, is there any sort of additional intelligence feeds I can add to this?
And I think it's important to differentiate firewalling from IDS as well, because you know, those signatures that you mentioned are they relate to the IDS, but the policy enforcement is done through our distributed firewall. So you can use, you know, the two do not have to be used together, right? You can have your team program the firewall and then still have IDS protection running. And in fact, that's exactly what we're creating here with NSX Intelligence, is the firewall rules services for that quality. So it's a combination, you know, the two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no, I got that. Sorry, maybe my question's not as clear. Is I'm trying to say, like, if I would want to have further intelligence than just you know, how you've got it working, is it just through the API I can send kind of instructions, I guess you could say, back, or does it have to be done through kind of the way you do it? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense.
You know, so I think that, I mean, to your point, you know, you can leverage the APIs and message bus. We are also working on productized sort of out-of-the-box integrations. We're starting with the VMware products like Carbon Black and vRealize Network Insight, but we will be expanding that as well. So I think we'll give you multiple options for how you drive the distributed firewalling and IDS through intelligence. Yeah, I wasn't entirely clear what you were asking, but I think the key point is we'll have those integration points and we will give you choice. I think there was an earlier question about, you know, visibility of how, you know, what these recommendations are, right? That they can be a bit opaque. So here we can view the recommendation, and this is before we've published anything, right? We can see 7 new firewall rules created automatically by NSX Intelligence that provide granular security policy and microsegmentation for this application. So we're locking down traffic to be the minimum required ports and protocols only. So front-end access from the cloud to containers, container level access, the traffic to databases, and then we drop everything else. So you can now then edit these rules if you know something more about your environment or want to, augment them. So this is the policy. As I mentioned, we can edit it in place. We can drag and drop it in the firewall rule set for precedence. Maybe you have infrastructure or environment rules that need to apply first. This is that visibility before we push the policy that I mentioned, right? This is a feature we're working on for the upcoming release of NSX Intelligence, which is simulation or dry run. So here we're showing you what the current policy looks like. If you drag the simulation slider, we're going to show you exactly what the new policy will look like before we push it. And then when you click publish, we'll actually tell you which other entities or which other workloads in your environment will be impacted by this new policy. So not only will we tell you the impact on this application, but on any dependent applications. Publish is kind of the magic button which says, boom, I want to turn this analytics-driven recommendation into policy. So if I click it, go back to my distributed firewall, that same rule set is now already published in the data plane, right? I'll go back to plan and troubleshoot, and there was a question about our time series view. So I'm going to select 1 hour, right? Filter again by my application. And now what you can see is, through automation and analytics, how easy we've made it to secure this fairly complex application through the, using the power of the NSX platform, but also the analytics and additional knowledge that we have in NSX Intelligence. So, not only we built the platform, but we're making it easier to get to this effective security policy and leverage, all of the capabilities that we have in NSX.